So hi and welcome back to the fourth tutorial, where we will be going over some of the variables in more detail. And this will include these things called types. Now I'm going to get rid of this print statement here initially. So, what are types? You know how we were talking about boxes in the last tutorial? Grant certainly wasn't talking about boxes. Well, the boxes have to necessarily, when they're created, restrict by type. So, for example, I can't put a sentence in a whole number. Just don't work. But there are other things we can do with these as well. Now, we could elaborate upon the different kinds of whole numbers you can have. You can have longer ones than these, by the way, because there is this thing called byte width. Now, what's byte width? Byte width is how many bytes there are in a variable, and that limits the size. Something like strings don't have that issue, because what they do is they effectively act as groups of different variables holding a character, and it varies by platform which ones they are. Some of them are Unicode. For those who don't know, Unicode is the thing that allows you to display all the funky characters. Sometimes there are other things. But for most variables you'll be dealing with, at least initially, you'll only have one. So you will tend to have only one variable when you declare these, at least in theory. And they're limited by byte width. Now, integers, as far as I'm aware, are limited to 4 bytes. Now, if you recall, a byte is 8 bits, at least on modern computers. Now, we can calculate the amount of number that it can store. The amount of number, because I'm on top of the world right now, in case you can tell. You can tell how much it can store based on that. Now, how can we calculate how much it can store based on the amount of bytes? So, let's suppose we have a 1 byte variable. In fact, I believe there is actually a data type called byte. I'm going to call it Fred. Because Fred, he ain't very big. He ain't a big guy for you. And we'll set him equal to 8. Now, he has 1 byte of width. And that means that he can have 2 to the power of 8 different combinations. Minus 1. Because you have a byte left over to represent negative or positive. In fact, I don't think that's the case in bytes, but regardless. Actually, no, it is. Yeah, it is. Never mind. It is, because they still have 255 values. It just switches over. Because 2 to the power of 8 is 256. Factor out the 1 byte for the flip, so you've got minus 127 through to 128. Now, as I mentioned, ints have 4 bytes. So they are 2 to the power of 32. Now, what is that in reality? Around about 4 billion. So you probably won't have to worry about that. And while other tutorials go into details about things like shorts, which are 2 bytes, and longs, which are like 8 bytes, or sometimes even 16 bytes, I don't think it's really necessary for most people. So I'll just explain the other primary types we'll be using. So we have these things called booleans. And what these do is they hold 2 true or false values. As you can see, is God real is true. And if I was to define another one, say I can demonstrate the other value, and they can only hold these values. So they can only hold true or false values, and they're really, really useful, actually. You'll find out over time that it's a really useful system to have. And turns out that a lot of things that we'll do later on regarding statements will ultimately be translated to true or false. But if you've done logic before, like formal logic, you'll know this. And the final type we'll cover today will be the double. Now, these are numbers that can hold decimals. There's also another one called float, but that's smaller. So we'll have Peter. We'll just call it Peter. And Peter is 87 years old. 87.0 years. Because we can have different decimal pointage. In fact, I could demonstrate with a float this pretty well. I'll call this pi, because I know pi to a number of digits. 3.141592653. And that's about as far as it will go. I believe, unless it wants to go less. Oh yeah, because it's a double. Yeah, see? You can't go too far with floats. For some reason... Oh, I know why. It's because I've got to put an F on the end. So, those are very, very basic types. And we can do things like addition, subtraction, division, and such with them. And I'll explain those in the next tutorial. But anyway, thanks for watching. A little bit of a short one today, and I'll see you on the next tutorial. Please share this so more people can learn. And also, if you need a private tutor or a developer, please comment.